Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Big news for Lethbridge College, as the educational institution will be changing over to a polytechnique this fall. The Edmonton Oilers fell one game shy of becoming Stanley Cup champions. We have reaction from both the players and fans. And a major upset took place in a Toronto by-election, which was won by a Conservative candidate. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government announced today, for the first time in their 67-year history, Lethbridge College will transition and become Lethbridge Polytechnic this fall. Dr. Brad Donaldson, President and CEO of Lethbridge College, joins us now to talk about this in more detail. Dr. Donaldson, what will this mean for the institution and students moving forward?
Great question. That's really the fundamental reason for doing it. It is about students. As a polytechnic, we've been behaving as a polytechnic for a number of years now. With the programs that we offer, apprenticeships, certificates, diplomas, degrees, and a growing amount of applied research, which is benefiting a number of sectors: agricultural, justice, VR, that type of thing. So it reflects who we are, but it also emboldens the pathways for students. We have more autonomy in terms of the program we offer. We will make sure that we are continually industry sector related. So our programs will be those that lead to fulfilling careers for our students who graduate, and support the local economy and industry with graduates who fit their needs and research that helps them grow.
Did this announcement catch you a little bit off guard, or has this been in the works for quite some time now?
This has been in the works for quite a while. You might recall a number of years ago, both Red Deer and Grand Prairie Regional College became polytechnics. And what that did was it shifted the landscape in terms of what institutions are and what they do in the province. It recognized those institutions. But with Lethbridge, as it was as a college, was doing the things. It had the programming, had the applied research. We were behaving as a polytechnic. So we embarked on a process with the government, advanced education, to recognize us as a polytechnic as well. Takes time. We had to put forward the business case, the justification to support that. And it just takes time to go through the political process. The Order in Council came out last week. So as of September 3rd, we will be officially legally known as Lethbridge Polytechnic. But after the Order in Council, we can now go forward and call ourselves Lethbridge Polytechnic and commute ourselves as Lethbridge Polytechnic.
Will this potentially mean more funding for your institution?
It won't mean more funding directly from the government, who is our largest funder at this time. We do believe that it will help with attraction for students. They will see the opportunities in Lethbridge as a polytechnic serving this region, and a number of Canadian or domestic and international students who will see and recognize us as the institution that we are. So we see an opportunity on the recruitment side, not on the direct funding, but certainly from the other side where we get applied funding from provincial and national bodies, the opportunity there to grow that. So there is an opportunity, to your question, to see increases of revenue coming into the institution.
Dr. Brad Donaldson, CEO and President of Lethbridge College, or soon Lethbridge Polytechnic, thanks so much for your time today. A total of $1.2 million will go to expand the Galbraith School Gymnasium to a middle school-sized gymnasium. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Higgin made the announcement Tuesday afternoon at Lethbridge City Council. The approved funding with the Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee can be used in 2026. Officials say the project is currently in the design phase. Higgins says the school will offer greater opportunities to access community and recreational spaces. He also says the funds come from the $10 million that was held for future projects from prior capital budget deliberations. A cluster of incidents can sometimes make it seem like certain crimes may be on the rise. On June 10th, Lethbridge police responded to 3 separate stabbings over the same weekend. Now, this prompted Bridge City News to investigate whether assaults with a knife were becoming more common here in our city. According to numbers provided by the Lethbridge Police Service, stabbings in our city may actually be trending downward despite the recent incidents. Over the past 3 years, the total number of knife injuries reported annually has been between 33 and 37. For the first 3 months of 2024, however, only 6 knife injuries have been reported. Lethbridge police were busy recently with an ongoing enforcement project targeting crime and social disorder in the downtown core. On June 19th, police executed 33 arrest warrants, laid 19 charges for various offenses, and seized a number of knives and drugs. Lethbridge police say 2 people were arrested on outstanding warrants and 55 tickets were issued during a targeted traffic enforcement project last weekend. Officials say they also removed an impaired driver from the road. They say the goal of the initiative was to target those who've been speeding, racing, and stunting in various areas of the city. Police say they received hundreds of complaints of dangerous driving behaviors on Mayor McGrath Drive and the Sharing Industrial Park. Police say we can expect to see a higher police presence in those areas this summer to help curb illegal driving activity. You know, the incredible season that the Edmonton Oilers put together came to a crashing halt, sadly, in Sunrise, Florida on Monday night, as the Florida Panthers won the Stanley Cup, beating the Oilers 2-1 and taking the best-of-7 affair 4-3. Oilers captain Connor McDavid says he was still proud of his team despite the loss.
Yeah, really proud, proud of the way we fought all year. We were behind the 8 ball almost immediately, and we fought an uphill climb for months and months and months, and just sucks.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to put into words right now. It's really, really hard. You're one period, one shot away from maybe winning the thing, and now you got to go through 82 regular season games again and play well enough to even get a kick at it, and it's hard right now.
Now, Oilers fans who overwhelmed many of the streets in our provincial capital were also disappointed that their team couldn't bring the cup back home to Canada. Many say the team will be back even stronger next season, however.
Obviously, we didn't put ourselves in the greatest position. Going down 3-0, it's not always the greatest, but we battled back. That was a good part. We came close in the end, 2-1. Almost got there, but, just needed a little bit more. It was very close.
Definitely a little sad, But I think we'll be back, so shake it off. We'll be back next year.
Hopefully, a Canadian team will bring the cup back home to Canada fairly soon. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it's hard to think about hockey with the beautiful summer weather we've been enjoying lately. Tomorrow it may be even warmer, but there's a slight chance of showers developing.
Yeah, well, it is sad to say we won't be thinking about hockey again for another couple of months at least. Poor Oilers. But to answer your question, Hal, Wednesday we could initially see some sunshine, then a mix of sun and cloud, and by the afternoon we're going to be seeing a 30% chance of showers, along with a risk of a thunderstorm and then some 20 to 40 kilometer per hour winds. But warm, a high of 29 degrees and a humidex of 30, which means that we could get some very muggy showers if those showers do in fact make their way to us. For the rest of the week, that we are seeing a bit of a cool down trend happening, and I'll be back later in the show to give you that 7-day forecast.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. A group in Nanton is seeking to renovate and preserve historic grain elevators in the town located north of our city here in Lethbridge. Back in 1933, there were 1,733 grain elevators, and today only 80 still remain.
We're bulldozing our history so fast, so we're gaining it for profit, but we kind of lose our soul, we lose our values, we lose what put us here. So I really want people to experience the elevators. I want them to come and investigate and see, and they don't even have to learn about history, just understand where these came from and what they were like inside. And I think that's a really good thing for our society and for people in general to know their culture, know their background a bit. These were the beacons, these were the things from the 10s and 20s that they were landmarks like Inukjuks. They were things that kind of symbolized where the town was and the town pride. And it also can't be forgotten that this isn't about agriculture. This was about the agriculture industry. This was economic driver. This is what made Canada. I mean, we were one of the largest suppliers of grains to the world in the 10s and 20s and even through the 30s. Even now, it can't be underestimated what the agriculture industry does for the world.
Those grain elevators are definitely historic. A city in southern Alberta that saw its mayor and 3 councillors fired by the provincial government has voted in new members. Shannon Dean has been elected the new mayor of Chestermere, located just east of Calgary. Former mayor Jeff Colvin finished in 3rd place. The city is suing Colvin and 3 former councillors, alleging they misappropriated more than $650,000. You know, the Calgary Stampede is definitely one of the greatest shows on earth, outdoor shows on earth, but did you know that the very first Stampede took place in Raymond, Alberta? Ron McMullen, president of the Raymond Historical Society, chatted with BCN's Naveen Day and explained how it all began.
Raymond Knight was the one who started the first Stampede. He managed a large ranch for his father, Jesse Knight, over 220,000 acres of land. And so one thing he wanted to see was a competition between all the ranches. So he invited them to come to the town of Raymond, named after him, to have a competition. So the first rodeo consisted just of two events, not saddle bronc riding, bareback riding, and also steer roping. And there were no prize money. It was just the pride money, you might say, which ranch had the best hands.
Make sure you catch the entire interview with Ron McMullen, president of the Raymond Historical Society, coming up later in our broadcast. There was a huge win for the federal Conservatives in the Toronto-St. Paul's by-election on Monday night. The riding, which has been a Liberal stronghold for over 30 years, was won by the Tory candidate, Don Stewart. He beat out the Liberal candidate, Leslie Church. The seat became available after Liberal MP Carolyn Bennett stepped down to become the ambassador to Denmark. Political reporter Brian Lilly says the win by the Poilievre Conservatives is a victory of epic proportions.
Well, this goes to 11. You know, if you remember Spinal Tap, this is beyond the Richter scale in terms of electoral shocks. I'm not overplaying this. Last time the Conservatives won, Barbara McDougall won it in 1988 for Brian Mulroney's Progressive Conservatives, and she was very much the old school red Tory. She was the last person to win it. People that were alive when she won this are now 35 years old. So think about that. There's a good chunk of the electorate that don't ever remember the Conservatives winning there.
Political reporter Brian Lilly will also have details of how both the Alberta and Saskatchewan governments are butting heads with the Trudeau government over a bill which many refer to as the Green Gag Law. He'll have details coming up after Business News. The Liberal government has been paying online influencers millions of taxpayer dollars to market their work that ends up looking like ads, preaching the Liberal message on platforms such as Instagram and TikTok. Treasury Board President Anita Nant says the way Canadians consume media today is changing and the government has to keep up with the times.
This is a time where the way in which media is consumed is evolving, and we need to evolve with the times. And certainly, when I was Minister of National Defence, we saw in numerous instances that misinformation and disinformation were creeping into our media, our systems across the country, in the private and public sector, were being hacked by cyber criminals. And so essentially, I don't think we should look at the use of influencers in a silo. We should actually think about how, as a government, we are responding to the use of misinformation and disinformation to change the way in which people think.
The Saskatchewan government says it will not comply with the Trudeau government's clean electricity regulations. Government officials say an assessment found that the rules would reduce the province's economic growth by more than $7 billion and cause utility bills to spike. Ottawa's regulations require provinces to move towards a net zero electricity grid by the year 2035 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Saskatchewan says if Ottawa wants compliance, it will have to take the province to court. A charitable group helping those fleeing abuse is expanding into Winnipeg. Shelter Movers provides free moving and storage services for those in abusive situations. Manager Sam Stiles says moving and storage fees could be a barrier. She says the goal is to begin operating in Winnipeg later this fall. Canadians are being urged to leave Lebanon while they still can as violence escalates between Hezbollah and Israel. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says the armed conflict could soon affect people's ability to leave the country and Canada's capacity to provide consular services. She says Canadians should avoid traveling to Lebanon altogether and should get out while they can, while commercial flights are still available. According to TBN Israel correspondent Yair Pinto, Hezbollah is reportedly storing weapons at the Beirut airport as the terrorist group prepares for war with Israel.
An employee at the airport is quoted in the report saying that large and mysterious boxes are arriving on direct flights from Iran, and things seems to be getting worse and worse. According to the report, the weapons Hezbollah is keeping at the airport include flak rockets, Kornet anti-tank missiles, Russian-made, of advanced models, heavy Burkan rockets, short-range Fatah 110 missiles, as well as M600 mobile ballistic missiles with a range of almost 300 kilometers. Another alarming detail is that Iran has also supplied Hezbollah with chemical explosives.
Samaritan's Purse is serving the desperate needs of both on both sides of Israel's conflict by providing food, ambulances, and other needed supplies in partnership with local churches and ministries. We have more now in this report.
These things I have spoken unto you to give you peace. In this world you will find tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. John 16:33. October 7th was a terrible day for the Israelis. They were caught by surprise by an attack from Hamas, something they weren't expecting. A lot of people, they come out of a tragedy like this, and it's intimidating. The best thing they can do is go out and help their brother, help their neighbor. What we're trying to do is keep the footprint low and enable Israelis to help Israelis in this crisis. So we're able to help them do that.
We're working with churches, we're working with church partners. You have close to 500,000 people that have been displaced, people that had to leave their homes because of the rockets and the fighting that's taken place.
We want to help people and share the love of Christ with them. We want to help everybody.
We had a 757 arrive with 1,000 advanced trauma life support kits.
That in case of emergency, missile attack, terrorist attack, medical professionals will be able to help and aid medically to the civilians that live around them, to their friends and neighbors.
The people that we're helping are the people in this area of what's called Gaza envelope. Hundreds of thousands of people who are displaced. I've never seen a culture as emotionally traumatized as I'm seeing here in Israel. And as I hear these sounds going on behind me, I can only imagine what is going on in Gaza and the pain and the suffering over there.
Sometimes you look and you just say, why? Or you look and you say, Lord, what can we do? The need is so great, but we serve a big God, and He's familiar with suffering.
As believers, we grieve, and we're here to mourn with those who mourn, and we're here to weep with those who weep, but we don't grieve as those that don't have hope. Because what is seen is so intense and so heartbreaking. If we can fix our eyes on what's unseen and what's eternal and actually give people a vision of what's beyond that, a hope that's beyond the right now. And that's what we're working towards.
Thank you very much.
God bless the work of Samaritan's Purse. Wow. Well, God has blessed us with a beautiful day here in southwestern Alberta. We had sunshine mixed with clouds and fairly warm. But there's a chance of more moisture developing on Wednesday. Full weather details are on deck. The average high for this time of year in Lethbridge is around 23 degrees. We were right around that today. More clouds and moisture may be on the way tomorrow, however. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we may see some rain develop, but also warmer temperatures too?
Yeah, indeed, much warmer temperatures tomorrow, Hal. Look at that, high of 29 degrees. However, we are going to see a humidex of 30, and that means that we could see some very muggy conditions, especially if we see those showers and thunderstorms like we are supposed to on Wednesday afternoon there. After that, looking at mainly cloudy skies overnight into Thursday, though, mix of sun and cloud, high of 23. Then we're going to see that cooling trend there. 12 degrees only for a high on Friday. Could see a 60% chance of rain, and then sunshine on Saturday, high of 22 degrees, up to 20 24 on a Sunday with a mix of sun and cloud. And then Monday, there's that 60% chance of rain again with a high of 20 degrees, keeping it down a little bit lower than the seasonal, the high for this time of year, which is 23. Average low is 9 degrees. 33 was our high temperature on this day. That happened back in 1988. And in 1951, we were sitting at a chilly 3 degrees. That's very cold for the end of June. No, thank you. Okay, we are looking at sunrise this morning. Happened at 5:25. Sunset this evening right at 9:43. Looking at 16 hours and 18 minutes of daylight. I knew there was an 18 in there somewhere. Okay, Victoria seeing a 30% chance of showers tomorrow. In the Wanda Strait, though, we are seeing a lot of winds, 40 to 60K winds, actually. 18 for a high there, 19 the expected high tomorrow in Vancouver with showers beginning near noon. Mainly overcast tomorrow in Edmonton with a high of 23. 23 also for a high in Calgary with a mix of sun and cloud. And both of those Alberta cities could see 20 to 40K winds tomorrow as well. Sunshine, actually a mix of sun and cloud in both Saskatoon and Regina tomorrow. 23 for the high in Saskatoon, 24 in Regina, high of 22 in Winnipeg. Winnipeg seeing mainly a sunny skies. As we get into the rest of the country here into the central region, we are seeing a mix of sun and cloud and turning into a 30% chance of showers happening both in Toronto and Ottawa tomorrow. 24 is the high expected tomorrow in Toronto, 23 in Ottawa, 24 in Montreal. Montreal seeing mixed showers throughout the day. A little bit in the morning and a little bit more by the afternoon there. 27 is the expected high in Fredericton. Fredericton could see a chance of thunder showers developing in the afternoon. Could see a 30% chance of showers as well. Mainly sunny skies tomorrow in Halifax, high of 26. 25 is the expected high in Charlottetown tomorrow there with a 30% chance of showers. And St. John's seeing a rainfall warning in effect through tonight. Tomorrow, though, up to 2 millimeters of rainfall, which is accumulated from periods of rain, periods of drizzle throughout the day. They're high of 18 degrees as well there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The Liberal government's changes to capital gains taxation came into effect today, despite significant pushback from business and physicians groups. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's spring budget proposed making 2/3 of the profit made on the sale of assets taxable. That's up from 50%. For a person's capital gains of $250,000 or less, the inclusion rate would remain at 50%. Federal government officials say the revenue it raises will help pay for housing and other priorities for young people. Canada's annual inflation rate came in at 2.9% in May. Now that's up from 2.7% in April. Stats Canada says it was largely driven by higher prices for services, which rose 4.6% from a year ago. Today's consumer price report, along with the upcoming June inflation data, are expected to play a major role in the Bank of Canada's next rate decision in early July. Earlier this month, the central bank cut its benchmark interest rate to 4.75%. The Alberta Energy Regulator predicts the province's oil sands production will grow by more than 17% to 4 million barrels per day by the year 2033. It says that figure is up from the 3.4 million barrels per day produced last year. Most of the growth is expected to come from on-site operations instead of oil sands mines. The agency also predicts that global oil prices will continue to rise from a projected average of $76 US per barrel for the current year to about $83 US by the year 2033. Tesla is recalling its futuristic Cybertruck pickup for the 4th time in the United States. Tesla says the windshield wiper motor can stop working because it's getting too much electrical current, which can cut visibility. In another recall, a trim piece of the truck bed can come loose and fly off, creating a hazard for other motorists. The new recall each covers more than 11,000 trucks. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 60 points on the day to finish at 21,788. The Dow was down 299 to 39,112. The S&P 500 was up 21 points to 5469, and the Nasdaq was up 220 points to finish at 17,717. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 87 cents to 80.80 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 7 cents to 274 US. Gold was down 15.10 to 23.1955 US an ounce, and silver was down 67 cents to 28.91 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.22 per bushel. Barley is at $6.10. Canola is at $13.48, and corn is at $7.34 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.30 to $181.60. Feeder cattle August contract was up 15 cents to $259.05. Lean hogs July contract was down 95 cents to $89, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.24 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government announced today that for the first time in their 67-year history, Lethbridge College will transition and become Lethbridge Polytechnic this fall. Dr. Brad Donaldson, President and CEO of Lethbridge College, says this will allow the educational institution more autonomy with the opportunity to attract more students from around the world. There was a massive upset in a Toronto area by-election which saw the Conservative candidate win in a Liberal stronghold, a seat that's been dominated by the Liberals for over 40 years. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have details for us momentarily and what that means for the Trudeau government moving forward. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Discover a new activity that you love. All are invited to this summer's Give It a Try events, hosted by the Lethbridge Sport Council. It's a great opportunity to try your hand at a new sport like climbing, badminton, handball, and more. Events are free to attend. Register in advance by visiting lethbridgesportcouncil.ca/program/give-it-a-try. Go back in time and see what it was like to live as a pioneer. Coyote Flats Pioneer Village is a Western heritage museum located 1.5 kilometers south of Pitcher Butte. Walk through the village and visit an old-time railway station, post office, fire hall, school, and so much more. The museum is open daily from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. with admission of $10 for adults or $20 per family. For more information, visit coyoteflats.org. And that's today's Bridge City News community calendar.
A massive upset took place in a Toronto area by-election. Toronto-St. Paul's, a riding that's been a Liberal stronghold for over 30 years, ended up going to a Conservative. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from the Big Smoke. Now, Brian, Liberal Carolyn Bennett was the MP in that riding for what, about 25 years, until she left to become the ambassador to Denmark, and now belongs to the Conservative candidate, Dawn Stewart, who beat the Liberal candidate, Leslie Church, and Stewart won with 42.1% of the vote compared to Church's 40.5%. Can you discuss the magnitude of this upset and what it means for the Trudeau Liberals?
Well, this goes to 11. If you remember Spinal Tap, this is beyond the Richter scale in terms of electoral shocks. I'm not overplaying this. Last time the Conservatives won, Barbara McDougall won it in 1988 for Brian Mulroney's Progressive Conservatives, and she was very much the old school red Tory. She was the last person to win it. People that were alive when she won this are now 35 years old. So think about that. There's a good chunk of the electorate that don't ever remember the Conservatives winning there. It's a very diverse riding in the western part. It's a very working class, lower income. You've got middle income areas. You've got high income areas, diverse ethnically, religiously. There is one area with a large Jewish population. That was a factor in it. But I'll tell you what, Hal, while that was a factor and people fed up with Justin Trudeau was a factor, another would be the number of people upset at the capital gains tax changes. A lot of small business owners in this riding, a lot of people that own their own shops, who are doctors, professionals of some sort. They were furious at these changes, which, by the way, took effect today. So you're voting the day before this big change, which the grain growers of Canada say will hit farm families with a 30% tax increase. Well, there's no farm families in Toronto, St. Paul's. It's smack dab in the middle of the city. But a lot of people in the same boat saying, I'm not going for this. A lot of people upset over the Trudeau government's position on the war in Israel and Gaza. So there were a number of factors at play here. Around midnight last night, it was still about a 10, 11 point lead for Leslie Stewart. Shortly after midnight, I texted a friend on Stewart's campaign and said, hey, congratulations. It's a polite thing to do. Congratulations. Looks like you guys won. They said, not ready to celebrate. We're nervous about the advanced polls. It wasn't until around 4:30 this morning, local time in Toronto, that it flipped so that Stewart was in the lead. They counted all night. And then around just before 5:30, he was declared the winner. That's how long it took. This 84 names on the ballot, meter-long ballot, it took forever to count this thing by hand.
Yeah, I saw all of the independents. I'm like, really? Come on. I couldn't believe how many independents were
Well,
running there.
that's actually the work of a guy who is an electoral reform activist, and he's done it before in places like Winnipeg, and he did it here this time. He registered 76 of these candidates and was the official agent for all of them. I don't know what point he's trying to make because he's not really talking to the media about it, but it did cause a lot of headaches in the by-election.
Yeah, and I looked at all the votes, 7 votes here, 6, 5, 3 votes. I'm like, come on. So Brian, bottom line, what does this signal? Could we see Justin Trudeau maybe step down as prime minister and leader of his party? Is there even the prospect of an early election call?
I think all kinds of things are up in the air right now. I've been in the Trudeau's not leaving camp. He's determined to stay and fight Pierre Poilievre. He believes he's the only one that can save us all from misinformation and disinformation, even though he's one of the biggest purveyors of it. But this has to change things. He has to spend the summer looking at this and saying, is it better for me and the party? Is it better for the country if I leave and step aside, let someone else take over? Give them a year to try and turn things around for the Liberal Party? I'm not sure what he's going to do. But he has to take time and reflect on this. Now, if he does step down, could that lead to an early election? Absolutely. Would the NDP look at this and say, hey, the Liberals are weak now, let's pounce? Well, if they base it on their performance in Toronto St. Paul's, no. Because even though the party doesn't normally perform very well in Toronto St. Paul's, they perform below their national average. They were extremely pathetic last night, only barely getting into double digits. And so that also tells you, Church came as close as she did only because she peeled away NDP votes. And an awful lot of Liberals went over to the Conservatives, or former Liberals went over to the Conservatives. So I think things are just in flux right now. And maybe everyone talks about Pierre Trudeau's walk in the snow. Maybe over the summer months, Justin Trudeau takes a walk in the sands at Tofino and thinks about his future.
Brian, it appears as though the Trudeau government has no end of headaches, including butting heads with premiers here in Alberta and in Saskatchewan who are vowing to fight provisions of Bill C-59, or it's being called a green gag law. Now, the changes to the Competition Act have industry groups upset as well. Can you explain why?
What a bizarre way to get people angry. The Competition Act, normally it's boring and we just talk about how they can't do anything. Just look at the price of gas and look at the price of groceries, and they never actually solve anything. Well, Bill C-59 gives them new powers, and these powers include being able to go in and fine companies up to $10 million on their first offense if they make statements that the competition commissioner believes are false or go against the environment or climate change. Now, the company would have a chance to be able to say, well, no, this is why we made the comments we did, and here's the information to back it up. But it's up to the competition commissioner to decide whether they accept that or not. This is like taking Charlie Angus's bill, which sought to criminalize it, and putting it into law, except instead of a criminal penalty, you're going to face lawfare, because people can just complain about your company. You're going to face lawfare or massive fines. And so a bunch of companies, including some of the biggest in the Canadian oil and gas sector, and groups like Pathway Alliance, they've taken down a lot of statements. So let's say you wanted to make a claim about how much cleaner it was and better for the environment for you to heat your home with natural gas instead of oil or coal. Well, you could have someone go and complain to the competition commissioner, and then even if you're not found guilty, you're spending a bunch of time fighting that through a quasi-judicial process. This is unreal. I don't think it's constitutional, Hal, but it's on the books now, and the industry is upset. Premier Smith and Premier Moe have both said they're going to fight it. They've both said they will use their similar but somewhat different acts. Alberta Sovereignty Act and Saskatchewan First Act, I think, are their names. But I'm not sure, having read the acts a bit, I'm not sure they apply in this case. I think it's going to have to go to court.
There's also some controversy surrounding Bill C-63, Brian, or the Online Harms Act. That bill would give the CRTC and the head of the Canadian Human Rights Commission the ability to police online speech. Now, apparently there are some questions surrounding the man who's been appointed to run the commission.
Yeah, his name is Mr. Tatani, and he is someone who's originally from Calgary, who, Shuvaloy Majumdar had run-ins, I'm told, with years ago at the University of Calgary, who's been involved in different legal cases there, was at one point a regional director for the Alberta Human Rights Commission, and now he's been appointed the head of the Canadian Human Rights Commission. But he's also someone who's made statements or reposted things on social media equating Israelis and Nazis, that Palestinians are the new Warsaw Ghetto Jews. He's called for Israel to be convicted of war crimes. An awful lot of statements that don't give you the sense that this is someone with clean hands on an issue that's going to be central to this. It looks like this is someone who comes with a definite agenda, a definite worldview that he has put out there with some force. And that's fine as long as you're not trying to police what I say. And that's the position he's going to be in. So a lot of questions about that. Shimon Fogel from Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center went to Ottawa to speak to the Justice Minister, Arif Farani, about that. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know." Admittedly, some of these posts are from several years ago, but he's got a long online history that's been well documented. And that has to leave all of us with a lot of concern. I have enough concerns with Bill 63, no matter who's doing it. Now I've seen who the government wants to be the judge of all things online, and now I'm even more concerned. So everyone should be reaching out to their MP and raising concern with not only the bill, but who the police and judge will be.
So while the feds are wanting to move forward with Bill C-63, Brian, comes word that the Trudeau government is paying millions of taxpayer dollars to influencers to get their message out. Don't these essentially look like ads on TikTok and Instagram that are being funded by taxpayers here?
Absolutely. A government that spreads an awful lot of misinformation and disinformation, by the way, is now paying people to make their fun videos on Instagram or TikTok and reach out to young people and say, "Hey, did you hear? And this is the truth. And this is what you need to know." Now, Minister Anita Anand, who's in charge of this file, says, "Well, it's because, I've got newspapers on my kitchen counter and my kids never read them. So, we have to be able to reach people somehow." Okay, great. But then buy an ad or tell your own story. Don't get people who are influencers because they have an audience. And I know influencers are derided. They come in all size, shapes, and forms. In some ways, people would say, "Well, Lily, you've got a big online audience. You're an influencer." Yeah, but if I'm going to do an ad for someone, I'm going to tell you it's an ad. I'm not going to pretend that I'm just talking about something. So, if anyone wants to pay me to do an ad for them, let me know, but I'll say it's an ad. This is very unbecoming of the government and leads to the question of, again, how they handle issues like misinformation and disinformation. I don't trust the government. I don't trust any government. They all put their giant spin on things, and now it's being hidden to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars each and every year to try and spread their word without letting us know it's really an ad.
That's where we get the term spin doctors from. Brian, concerns are being raised as well about new provisions in Bill C-69 that would allow the federal health minister to ban or regulate where certain products such as vitamins or supplements could be sold. So what's the issue here?
So it's anything that's considered a therapeutic, and that's where vitamins and supplements come in, and they have some people worried. But Minister Mark Holland has also made it no secret that he really wants to go after nicotine pouches, which are used as a way to help people to stop smoking. And he wants them only sold in pharmacies. And he wants them behind the counter. And he'd really like to get rid of them. And he's saying that it's not safe to sell them in places like convenience stores, which, by the way, currently sell cigarettes. So, why can you sell cigarettes and not a smoking cessation product? But the law is also so vague that he could decide, he's given himself so much power that he could decide, oh, claiming vitamin C is, good for your health in the winter. Oh, no, you can't do that. We're banning it. Or we're going to make it so that you have to go to a certain place to get vitamins or supplements. This has a lot of people concerned. It's a broad and sweeping power that the government has, given themselves. And you look at C59, C63, C69. These all, that's the one thing they have in common. They are giving themselves broad sweeping powers, the kind that we should be wary of any government having, because what I always tell people, Hal, is you may believe that the party that's in power now is all right to have those powers because you support them. But will you support the party that you oppose having those same powers? Probably not. And if that's your answer, that no, I wouldn't trust those guys with those powers, then don't trust these guys with those powers. And so there's a real theme of trying to control things going through the Trudeau government right now. Pierre Poilievre's not wrong when he says he doesn't want to control your life, but the current government does. They're showing with their own legislation that that's their agenda.
Brian, the latest inflation report is out. After going down slightly last month, it ticked back up to 2.9%. In your thoughts, what's really driving this? And will this maybe put a pause on more rate cuts by the Bank of Canada?
Potentially could. We'll have to see how the next inflation report goes. My colleague Lauren Gunter was pointing out that Stats Canada has announced they've changed how they're going to calculate inflation, and that will include putting more emphasis on food as part of the whole basket. I mean, they look at a whole basket of goods. What do you need to buy to live your life? And that's how they try and calculate inflation. It's not an exact science, but right now it's the best that we have. So this month, it was things like cell phone bills going up, goods and services, travel, all of those increasing. Food went up by about 1.5%. But since May 2020, food inflation has gone up just shy of 23%. You're paying on average. Now, I know some things are even higher, 40, 50, 60% higher than they were at the beginning of the pandemic. But on average, you're paying a quarter more for your groceries than you did 4 years ago. Oh my goodness, Hal, that is very tough for the average family to swallow. And that's about to change with the inflation rate. So if it goes up again next month and the month after that, I could definitely see Tiff Macklem and the Bank of Canada saying, well, hold on, we can't cut rates any further. We don't want to accelerate the economy. We need things to slow down. We're kind of in a really bad situation right now. Housing crisis going on in many parts of the country. And one of the reasons that they're not building is interest rates are high, not only for the buyers, but for the builders. And they don't want to take on those types of rates because what it will mean for prices. Not a good economic situation to be in.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.
Every Canada Day weekend, the town of Raymond, Alberta has a double celebration. Of course, it's Canada Day, and it's also Raymond Heritage Days, along with the Raymond Stampede Rodeo. Today, we're going to chat a bit about this year's event, but we also want to talk about the history of Raymond, Alberta. So joining us today is Ron McMullen. He is the president of the Raymond Historical Society. Ron, welcome to Bridge City News. Great to have you on today.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Now, Raymond is famous for its annual parade and also for its Stampede Rodeo because it is, in fact, the very first Stampede in Canada. So can you give us a brief history of when and how this rodeo came to be?
Yes, I can. Raymond Knight was the one who started the first Stampede. He managed a large ranch for his father, Jesse Knight, over 220,000 acres of land. And so one thing he wanted to see was a competition between all the ranches. So he invited them to come to the town of Raymond, named after him, to have a competition. So the first rodeo consisted just of two events, not saddle bronc riding, bareback riding, and also steer roping. And there were no prize money. It was just the pride money, you might say. which ranch had the best hens. So that happened in 1902.
And you mentioned how the town of Raymond is actually named after a person named Raymond Knight, who is one of the sons of Jesse Knight, who was a mining owner from Utah. And so what was it that sparked an interest for Raymond to come to Canada?
Okay, we need to go back to Jesse's background. Jesse actually owned the ranch at age 22, just 2 miles west of Payson, Utah. And so he was a rancher at heart. But he got interested in finding ore, like others, in some limestones. And so he felt impressed to go to one certain place, and he and his son started digging, and a month later came upon a large amount of silver. And so he had enough silver and money. He bought out 6 mining operations, and eventually had $10 million, which was a lot of money back then. And so he had money, and a number of people, of course, would propose different things to him for ventures. And a fellow named John Taylor, who lived up here, and also Charles McCarty, made a proposal to him that he come up in this area and buy a ranch. And so he sent 2 of his sons, Raymond and Will, up to this area to look over things. And they went back and reported, and then John Taylor and Charles McCarty went down to Utah, and Mr. Knight, Jesse, bought 30,000 acres of land near Spring Coulee. Having invested some money, he decided he'd come up and explore things himself and see it. And when he came up, he was quite enthused. And so he bought another 220,000 acres of land. And so as he came up, he mulled over a request in a talk given by the LDS Church president, where he said, "Men and women of wealth and means, open your vaults and your purses and create employment for those who need the labor." And when he arrived here, he thought about things for a few days and had a clear idea as to what he wanted to do. So he was going to build a sugar factory and create a town. And that he did.
Now, you just mentioned the Latter-day Saints Church in your last answer there. Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the 1,500 residents of Raymond were LDS church members who immigrated to Canada. And one of the reasons is that there were jobs available with the Raymond Sugar Factory that Jesse Knight started up, right?
That's exactly right. And so it was a new opportunity for people. For example, my great-grandfather, Alonzo McMullen, came here in 1902, so the time the sugar factory was being built. It actually took 2 years to build the sugar factory, creating a lot of jobs. So the town actually went from 1 person in 1901 to 1,560 or so in 1903, when the sugar factory was complete. So there were a lot of people came because of the jobs.
So you're very well rooted in Raymond then. Which is amazing to hear. Now, Jesse Knight also made a stipulation that the town of Raymond was to be free from alcohol. And it's very interesting that this is still the case today in Raymond.
Yeah, it was in our charter it was a charter for 99 years. And alternatives have been discussed in the community. And the decision is made that as of now, that will be the case. Raymond is still a dry town.
And there were also quite a number of Japanese workers who moved to Raymond from BC to work in the sugar beet fields.
Yes, actually, there were Japanese before the Second World War here. The Knight Sugar Company invited people from various places, Japan. My grandfather was in Holland and Belgium, Jim Walker on my mother's side, and invited people from Belgium and Holland to come and work in the sugar beet industry. So there were people prior to the war, but there were about 600 Japanese in southern Alberta prior to the war. With the internment of the Japanese people by the Canadian government offshore of BC, Then many of them were in internment camps, and often the men were sent off to work somewhere. Well, a fellow named William Russell, who was part of what was called the colonization office associated with the Lethbridge Northern Irrigation District, he wrote a letter to the government of Canada saying that if there were Japanese people, whole families who would like to come in the sugar beet industry, they would be welcome here. And so, come the end of the Second World War, in fact, I'll tell you this, a fellow named Toro Iwasa, who served in the war, he wrote about this and he said, prior to the war, there were about 600 Japanese in Alberta. And he said, when I came home, there were 3,600. So there were a lot of Japanese people who came. When I was growing up in Raymond, it was not unusual to have 4 or 5 Japanese students in our class. They were just our friends. It was just normal for us.
And how are some of these Japanese families thriving in southern Alberta?
Well, when they first came, it was a challenging situation, but of course the Japanese people are industrious and hardworking, and were by and large very well received, and worked hard and saved money, and many of them bought their own farms, and were great farmers. Our potato industry, was founded largely on the backs of the Japanese farmers. You went, say, to McCain's or something, you'd see a Japanese flag flying there as well. It gave us inroads into markets for southern Alberta products as well.
Now, people will recognize the names William Lethbridge, Nicholas Sharon, and Elliot Galt as historical coal mining figures associated with establishing the city of Lethbridge. You say there was an interesting connection between these men and Jesse Knight. Can you share a bit about this?
Sure, it is kind of an interesting story. I'd like to tell you the long one, but I'll have to tell you the short version. So basically, Elliot Galt connected with Nicholas Sharon because Nicholas Sharon ran a ferry and also took coal and sold it in Fort Macleod to the RCMP. And Elliot got some coal, assayed it, and it was very good. And so he persuaded his father to create a coal mining business. And they got investment from England, which included, and had business associates, which included William Lethbridge, a guy named Coots Burdett, another one whose name was Sterling. Anyway, a number of our towns are named after these folks. And so the Galts needed to ship their coal. They tried it on barges. Of course, that didn't work on the Old Man River in the summer. And then they built railroads to ship the coal primarily to Medicine Hat, Dunsmore, where the railroads would fuel and water up because they were steam locomotives, and also a railroad down into by Great Falls. The federal government gave them 6 sections of land, so about 3,840 acres, I think it is, for every mile of railroad they built. So the Galts had huge tracts of land, and the land was of no value to them unless they could sell it. So ranchers would pay pennies, settlers would pay dollars. But to get settlers here, you need water. And so the Galts connected with Charles Orcard and John W. Taylor, and they had Elliot's brother-in-law, Charles McGrath, was in charge of selling the land. They made 11 trips to Utah to persuade the LDS Church to build the irrigation system. And after 2 years of work, that system was built, going from Kimball to Raymond and Sterling. And when that 2 years was up, then these people had no employment. And so when Jesse Knight came up, there were quite a few people already available to work in the factory and to help to build it. So that maybe that's a bit of a long story, but that's what's all connected.
Well, I was actually going to go into the irrigation system that we enjoy here in southern Alberta, because it actually did come about at the hands of the early LDS church settlers in Raymond and Carson areas. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure. Charles Orcard and the people in Carson diverted water out of Lee's Creek and irrigated about 800 acres quite successfully. So that when the Galts wanted to get water, they knew who to talk to in the first place. And so it was with some persuasion that the LDS people came to Alberta, because they just had settled finally after being back east of the United States and now settled in Utah. So, but they received a call from the church to come up here and build the irrigation system. Many of them settled in the town of McGrath. And McGrath has a great irrigation museum there. But the people then would use horses. There were 200 teams of horses. And they would plow the sides of hills and use what's called slip scrapers, half-yard scrapers, and move the soil to the other side of the hill and form what was called one-sided canals. And then they did other movement of dirt. And then they built the structures out of wood. So this was a 2-year process for them to actually get the water from Kimball, which is south and a bit west of Karsten, all the way to Raymond and Sterling.
That's amazing. And to our viewers, just a quick reminder that the Raymond Stampede Rodeo will take place on Saturday at 6 p.m. and again at 2 p.m. on Monday, along with all kinds of other events, including the parade at 10 a.m. on Canada Day, as well as fireworks at 11 p.m. You can see the schedule at www.raymond.ca. Ron McMullen is the president of the Raymond Historical Society. Ron, this has been really interesting to hear from you. Thank you so much for sharing some things about the history of Raymond.
Well, thank you so much. And if you come to Raymond and go to the parade, you'll see my house has flowers out front. You'll know which one has a long flower bed. Wave hello. I'll be glad to see you.
I will look out for those flowers. I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.